give the floor to His Excellency, the Permanent Representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
شكرا سيد الرئيس مرة ثانية.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I have clearly listened to the representative of the Turkish delegation, which asked a question about the beginning of the crisis in my country, and in my view, and here I'm drawing inspiration from our major philosopher. If those that were ignorant were killed, there would be fewer differences between people. But I'm saying all this because she doesn't really know what she's talking about. So the representative needs to understand what I'm saying. Allow me to recall the following. A terrorist called Haitham El-Kaseb, who worked for Turkish intelligence in Libya, transferred in 2013 2 liters of sarin gas from Libya to the airport in Istanbul on a flight, a civilian flight. And this individual arrived at Istanbul's airport and was transferred through the Turkish intelligence services to the Syrian border and crossed these borders, infiltrated them. He wasn't alone. He was accompanied by 2 liters of sarin gas. Of course, this gas was used in the city of Khan Ersel, near Aleppo, in 2013, first of all. In March 2013, to be more precise, the use of this gas was seen again in several other regions in Syria. And incidentally, the government of my country and I myself, on behalf of my country's government, I went to meet with the previous Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in his office only a few hours after the use of that chemical gas in the city of Khan el-Assal. And I said to him on my country's behalf 2 things. I said that I asked him for his assistance, first of all, in identifying whether or not this chemical gas had been used in the area of Khan el-Assal. Secondly, I asked him for his assistance in identifying the entity, or in clarifying the identity of the party responsible for using this chemical gas. The previous chief of staff asked me for a little bit more time to discuss this issue with the key players in the Security Council. He did that and told me over the telephone then, in the middle of the night, well, he said, "Ambassador, please inform the government of your country." The Secretary General said this. "I will help you to identify whether or not chemical gas was used, or this chemical product was used in Khan el-Assal or not." The previous Secretary General said that. But I'm not going to help you identify who it was that perpetrated that crime. They were the very words spoken in an interview between myself and the previous Secretary General. Since the very first use of this chemical gas in Khan el-Assal, there has been a decision taken, or there was a decision taken following the use of that gas then, to not unveil the identity of the perpetrators of that crime in Syria. What's important here is that the power wielded by major countries that are against my country and the corrupt money from Saudi Arabia and Qatar has meant that the Commission of Inquiry has failed in its endeavours, just as the joint investigation mechanism. These are things that we've talked about in the Security Council. We did that just a week ago, and for that reason I won't enter into details. As regards the Qatari regime, I haven't really attached the rightful importance to this regime in my speech, but allow me to say that there was a conspiracy between this regime and terrorists, the al-Nusra terrorists and Daesh terrorists, to remove members of UNDOF from the Syrian border to kidnap them. The Qatari regime is only in conflict with the Qatari regime only regarding who's responsible for this Wahhabist terrorism. There is competition between them to see who is the greatest terrorist between them. And I just wish to raise a question to the representative of that regime. How can it be that you talk about human rights in other countries when at the same time, as you know, Qatar is a country without a constitution and with no proper electoral regime? There are several coups d'etat between fathers and sons and between cousins in Qatar and between brothers, indeed. A governing family has got its hands on the country's wealth, laid its hands on that wealth to spend it and finance terrorism and satisfy the personal desires of the country's leaders. And they've brought in millions of foreign workers to work in conditions of slavery. And given the conviction of Qatar that human rights are so important, well, a Qatari poet actually said, well, he was put in prison for life, indeed, because he dared to write a poem in which he criticized the human rights situation in Qatar. And Qatar stands there and says that they attach great importance to human rights. I would simply recall a few concepts regarding the Saudi regime and a few ideas. They prevent the erection of places of worship for non-Muslims, despite the fact there are, of course, non-Muslims working in Saudi Arabia. And they also prevent the burial of non-Muslims on Saudi Arabian land. Foreign workers come to Saudi Arabia but cannot be buried there if they're not Muslims. I won't cite a number of bizarre verdicts here that have been handed down in that country, but allow me just to conclude by citing some poetry from a major Arab poet. And I will try and read this. Amachawi said that people fall into two categories: those that die alive and those that live beyond their burial. And if the dead from among a people are properly dead, that all the people in general are dead. Thank you.
I thank the Syrian Arab Republic